Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Nick. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Good, thanks.
Well, thanks for joining me, and thanks everybody for tuning in. The coronavirus pandemic has left many companies rethinking their office spaces. Some are increasing their work from home policies, others are considering shrinking their portfolio. During all this, many people think the flexible office space market will be more attractive to companies going forward, as tenants might be worried about signing long-term deals but still need space. I'm here with Bryan Murphy, the CEO of Breather, which is a flexible office space provider that focuses more on private offices for members. Before we get started, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank Breather, today's program sponsor. So to start off, can you tell me, just sort of broadly a little bit how sort of the coronavirus pandemic has impacted Breather and, the broader flexible office space market?
Sure. Thanks, Nick, for having me on this morning. It's interesting. I've gone through a couple of these crises now, and what I found is that crises tend to accelerate trends, trends of disruption, and trends, especially when disruption benefits businesses. So if you think about the Great Recession 10 years or so ago, that caused significant acceleration in the adoption of SaaS, software as a service, because it was more flexible, it was more cost effective for businesses, et cetera. And I see a similar trend happening here with the COVID pandemic. I see that pandemic accelerating companies' desire for space as a service, in effect, because they're looking for ways to reduce their financial risk. They're looking for ways to have greater flexibility. And this is an industry where we're already taking an accelerating trend and accelerating that even faster because of the benefits.
Speaking about, sort of accelerating trends, one of the ones that everybody's sort of been talking about is, the work from home. Obviously for the past, 3 months or so, most people have been forced to work remotely. Do you think that's going to have an impact on sort of the broader office market and the flex office market?
Yeah, I think so. I think probably everyone on this call has experienced one of the largest social work experiments in the history of mankind, right? So work from home has been an idea. It's been around for a long time. I think that, current work from home is less than 5%, maybe 2%, 3%. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some form of work from home go far north of that into the sort of 20% range. I don't think it works for all companies all the time, but I think that people have definitely recognized that it's a significant benefit to your lifestyle, significant reduction in cost, and I think it'll be incorporated pretty broadly. And so what we're seeing, we talk to hundreds of companies every week, and I would say the two trends the three things that we hear the most are, number one is no one wants to sign a long-term lease right now. Once again, it's about managing financial risk. There's a huge capital outlay, and there's just a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Short term because of COVID and the economy, and longer term because of this work from home trend. They're trying to figure out, hey, what's our policy going to be? How much space do we need? What does that space need to look like? And it will be very different in order to take advantage of that. But I could see work from home in the 20% range. And that's one of the reasons why we're closing deals right now. Companies are saying, hey, my lease is expiring. I don't want to commit to a traditional lease right now because I want to see how all this shakes out. And so we're closing deals because we help customers, we help them manage their financial risk, reduce costs, and give them a really attractive, flexible solution to co-working.
And, for, those customers who could, still just work from home, it's been sort of proven for the last couple of months. I mean, what are some of the reasons that they are still looking at sort of, breather spaces and getting back to some offices?
Sure. I think all of us have experienced this. I miss the office. I miss my colleagues and my friends and sort of the interaction that we have there. I think that working remotely can be productive, certainly for certain types of professions. I think a lot of tech professions, a lot of engineers like to go heads down in the work, and they don't like the distractions. But if you're in collaborative, and I think collaboration obviously really suffers. New idea a generation suffers. And I do think that the attachment that people feel to their companies and their colleague suffers. It's a little strange to be remote, right? So how do you build up those relationships with people in your office after work, et cetera, et cetera? It is very difficult to do it. You can only do so many fun things on Zoom. Fun. I guess I'm putting my air quotes around fun.
And, here in New York City, we sort of started phase 2 this week, more people coming back to the offices. So, how has Breather been sort of, getting members, more members back, and sort of what steps have been put in place to make it safe for them to return?
Sure. I would say that, there's a couple of things. So I would say from a perspective of what's happening, probably 10% of folks were, essential services, stayed in the office and were working from, from our offices. I think about 10% will go back this week or have gone back this week. And another 50% have said, you know what, we're going to kind of wait and see what happens until September. And another 30% or so don't know what they're going to do. But people have been coming back to work. And one of the things that we did was we've really spent the last several weeks preparing our spaces and our business for our customers to come back to work when they're ready to come back to work. So there's been a significant amount of work that's gone into really a huge endeavor across our entire organization. And it really focuses on 3 pillars, right? One is design, right? So working with our customers to make sure that the spaces themselves were ready to support social distancing in the office. The second pillar is around FF&E, working with our customers to make sure that they had, sanitation stations, that there was plexiglass sneeze guards in place where they need them, different types of furniture where it was required. And the third pillar being operationally, really rethinking how we handle all of our cleaning, all of our maintenance to comply with CDC guidelines, to help enable our customers to have the safest experience they can have when they come back. So, for example, HVAC, right? So we had to go around and we've been in the process of making sure that all the maintenance is being done properly in the HVAC, that we're upgrading filtration systems to MERV 13, et cetera. So there's been a tremendous amount of activity that's happened over the last 12 weeks or so to make sure that the spaces are ready for our customers when they're ready.
And how have you been attracting either, existing customers to come back, or, you said you've been talking to a lot of sort of new clients, and, what is your pitch, I guess, been for them?
Sure. So first off, obviously the flexible thing. So we're getting a lot of calls from companies that are coming up on their lease, and in the next few months their leases are expiring. They know they need a place to work, and I think they do need a place to work. So they said, okay, we need a place to work, but I don't want to sign a 7 to 10 year commitment. Let's talk about flexible, a place that we can park for the next 6 months, 12 months, et cetera. Right. So that's a huge benefit. Say it takes all that liability off the balance sheet. They don't have to spend the money on build out. They don't have to spend the money on furniture, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a big benefit for them. Number 2 is we actually get a lot of calls from companies that are currently in co-working. They enjoy flexible today, but they're concerned about the density in co-working. So for example, I think today on average it's about 55 rentable square feet per head in a co-working facility, which is pretty tight. Versus, our customers enjoy an average of 110 square feet. So we're considerably less dense already. The spaces are private, which means you don't have to worry about, I think there's a concern in co-working about, okay, who's coming into my space? Where have they been? What are the protocols and procedures of that company or freelancer, et cetera? So in Breather, they're all standalone private spaces, and that gives companies a much greater level of feeling that the spaces will be safe and secure.
And the sort of new clients you've been talking to, has it been sort of across the board? What kind of companies, small to mid-size, your typical clientele, or has it been some, newer ones stepping in now?
It's always a mix. Our customers are mixed about 50-50 between enterprise customers and growth stage companies. Most of the enterprise companies, they've got spaces, they're looking for satellite offices in cities that might not be their headquarters. The growth stage companies are looking for headquarters or satellite offices for their company. So it's a pretty good mix of both types of firms. Most of our customers are TAMI, technology, advertising, media, information services, and particularly in New York, financial. About 15% of our customers are financial.
And you mentioned satellite office. One of the pre-submitted questions we got, and ties in nicely. Are you gonna, after all this, are you gonna look to expand, beyond sort of urban cores to, to sort of capture the satellite office?
Yeah, what's been interesting is, once we kind of talked a little bit about crises accelerating trends, and once again, back in the Great Recession, and when the cloud was coming online and SaaS was coming on, I remember I used to be, my background is mostly software as a service and technology, and I remember conversations pre-2009 when companies would say, "There's no way I'd ever put my data up in the cloud. It's not safe, secure. We'll never do that." And lo and behold, 10 years later, that's what everyone does, right? So we're having similar conversations with a lot of landlords right now who a year or two ago were like, "Oh my God, co-working, we're flexible to disaster. This is not something we want to do." Also, and they're recognizing that there's really been this secular shift in the market where customers, particularly now, are saying, "Hey, we want flexible." And so we're really in the business of enabling those landlords to offer a flexible office product. So we're having conversations with a lot of those about enabling landlords to offer flexible workspace through a partnership. So that's been happening. And where it's also been happening, we're seeing this shift right now to a hub and spoke, where companies are, particularly in the really dense urban areas like New York and San Francisco, et cetera, where commuting is a real issue. A lot of companies are saying, "Hey, you know what? We want to reduce this need for commute. So let's look at setting up satellite offices near where people live." And that can be in New York City. A lot of people live in New York City, or in San Francisco, it's kind of the inverse. A lot of people live in the city, but they commute down to the valley. So we've seen an accelerating trend there where companies are looking to set up these hub and spokes. And so, and particularly in these more smaller city or rural market or suburban markets. So we're having a lot of conversations there.
And, with the companies, one of the things people have been saying is that a lot of people are going to start sort of fleeing expensive cities like New York because, density is terrifying now because, the virus is transmitted in close quarters, and, it's really hard to get around away from people in New York. I mean, have you been hearing from companies that's been happening, that their employees are trying to sort of get out of cities?
Yeah, for sure. I'm up here in Fairfield County, and Fairfield and Westchester are super busy right now. A lot of companies looking to move out. But I would tell you, this happened also. I've been around for a little while, so I was here in 2001 after 9/11 too, and that happened for a couple of years after 9/11. A lot of companies are like, "Oh gosh, the city's not safe. We're worried about terrorism," and they moved out. And then, that magnet of the urban area, particularly of New York City, pulls them back in again. It's, the greatest city in the world, and there's a reason why people want to live and work here. So I think that short term, we're going to see, an exodus. Longer term, I think, as we, work our way out of this pandemic, whether it's naturally or through vaccine or whatever, the people will return back to the city.
And, during all this, I mean, you've been talking to a lot of clients. Have you been looking to sort of open new spaces yet, or is it still sort of a wait and see approach?
We're continuing to expand and open spaces. We got slowed down obviously with the pandemic and holds on construction, but we've got a number of new spaces, beautiful spaces that are opening up right now. And like I said, we're pretty excited because we've actually, we're on the phone all the time with our broker partners, and we're closing deals, which every day. And I just knock on wood and really grateful for that. But there are companies that companies need office space, and their leases are coming up. They've got to do something, or they want to get out of co-working, or they need space. So we are closing deals every day, and that's been a good thing.
And for sort of future spaces, has this caused you to sort of, rethink the design of spaces, or have you just had to make like small tweaks?
Yeah, great question. So this is one where you really have to be thoughtful. Commercial real estate is a very long-term game and capital investment, right? So you build something now, you put millions into it, and you're going to live with that for the next 10 years. So one of the things that we're trying to be very thoughtful on how we build out these spaces. There's some things that we are going to do, like, so for example, all our new spaces will have touchless fixtures, for example, right? But we're not going to make any changes that would make it economically unfeasible for companies to use the spaces or for ourselves. I do expect that sometime over the next several months to a year, we will have our arms around this pandemic, and that will be behind us. And so you want to make sure that as you're designing these spaces and running these spaces, that they are as safe as they can be during the period of time that you're having the problem, the crisis, and then also make sense 3 or 4 years from now.
Speaking sort of the redesigns, I know it's not really sort of breather, but when people think of co-working, a lot of them think of sort of, with the hot desk and where, you grab with your laptop, you sit in a shared table. Obviously, not a lot of people are going to want to do that now. Do you think that whole trend is going to sort of go away, or is it going to sort of be, once a vaccine happens, or, whenever people are going to sort of return to that kind of office?
I think, I think it'll probably moderate as they get their arms around that. I think that co-working has a big place in commercial real estate. It makes a lot of sense, especially for freelancers, individual contributors looking to network and having a place that's not their kitchen. And it makes sense for really small companies, maybe 8 or less, because it's super easy to get into, it's super easy to get out of, and you can scale up your team. I've used them before. You go from 1 to 2 to 8, and then in our experience, you kind of get to like 8 or so, and then you're becoming a real company, and you want to have a real company space. You have your own space where you can start building your own culture. So that's really what companies use Breather for, is when they get to that point where they're ready to have their own culture.
And, all this has caused a lot of, other companies, either flex market or even just regular companies, to sort of, look at their portfolio, rethink sort of if spaces, if offices make sense, if these locations make sense. I mean, has Breather done that? Are you planning on maybe trying to get out of some of these deals? The spaces that we've been building, Breather has really been known as a provider of on-demand meeting spaces. And I joined about 1.5 years ago, and really our focus since then has been building out purpose-built flexible offices. And so, for example, all of our spaces are less than 10,000 square feet. Our sweet spot is right there at the bell curve, around 4,500 square feet, plus or minus t-shirt size, so 2,500 square feet, 4,500 square feet, 8,500 square feet. That's really where the vast bulk of flexible transactions take place. So as a result of really, building out these really beautiful, comfortable offices in that size range, and using all the data that we get from our meeting space business, we're processing, I think, 20 million bits of data every week, understanding location, size, and price to optimize for our customers. We sell out 95% of our spaces within 30 days of launch. So for that perspective, no, we've been, once again, we have great data to work from. I think the team builds incredible spaces. Customers love the experience. We have 95% customer satisfaction. So the spaces that we're in for flexible private office, they're great. We love them. And 2019 already had a lot of sort of shakeups to the flexible office space market, and then obviously all this happened. So, I mean, how has that changed sort of, Breather's plans for 2020? Like, how have you rethought sort of, I guess, the year?
Yeah, 2020. We're looking forward to the end of 2020. No, 2020, we were ripping along on plan. Obviously, this happened, and it definitely had an impact on our business, slowed us down. But I would, for example, the number of leads that we've had, phone calls coming in, has doubled in the last 30 days and continues to accelerate. So I think that, kind of once again, going back, companies, I think, like I said, a lot of companies are saying, okay, let's just take the summer and see what happens. We'll come back after school starts, right? Which is a really important date because they've got kids at home, they need to know that their kids have a place to go. So as that begins to happen, companies are looking out now and saying, well, we need office space in September, October, November. We need to make those plans now. So we've seen activity really accelerate. I think heading into the back half of Q3 and Q4 would be very strong for us.
And everybody's talking about sort of a staggered approach to sort of returning to the office. I mean, for a flexible office, space provider, what does that look like for, your spaces and your members?
Yeah, so we're on the phone every day with our customers and asking them, having a discussion, hey, how would you like the office to be set up? Do you want any changes? And so where they are asking for changes or additional protective FF&E or whatnot, we're accommodating those needs. We're providing. We've scoured the globe to find great providers of everything from masks to hand sanitizers to plexiglass shields, et cetera. So we've got a really great supply of that for our customers that need it. And we're also, if they need us to move furniture around, we're doing that to help them space out a little bit more. And most customers, in fact, in New York right now, it's a 50% occupancy maximum. So I think they understand the need to bring back folks in shifts, which we're seeing them do, right? So 2 days on, 4 days off, et cetera, whatever the schedule might be. So we're working to accommodate their needs on that. And I think that will be in place. That will be in place for the rest of the year. I would be willing to bet.
And either sort of the broader real estate community or sort of specifically Breather. I mean, what sort of things has this made you learn about sort of real estate? Like, what lessons can you take away from this once we all sort of start being able to leave our houses again?
Yeah, well, it's obviously the most important lesson is location. At the end of the day, you've got to have offices in the right locations at the right size and be priced appropriately. I think the thing that we've also learned is working really close with our landlord partners. This has been an exceptionally difficult period, and so we've got relationships with over 200 landlords, and they've been great partners with us, recognizing that real estate is a long-term business, and we're dealing with a crisis here that is going to last months, not years. I think are the two the big lessons. And I think thirdly, I would say the thing that I've been most impressed with is just our team. I mean, you never know what people are really like until you have a crisis. And I've never seen anything like this in the 18 or so years that I've been managing businesses, and our team has really stepped up and just with such great passion and inventiveness and creativity to help solve problems for our customers. It's just been really inspiring. And
how is, speaking of that, how is the transition for your team on sort of working from home, and what's sort of your office reentry plan looking like?
We have offices in our main offices are in New York and Montreal. New York just opened this week, so we just completed our deep cleaning of our New York office, and so it's open now, so people will start going in. Montreal, we happen to be redoing our office up there, so that's going to be complete. And as soon as that's complete and cleaned, then people will start going back up into that office. I think that we took a poll, and I don't think it's dissimilar than any other company. In fact, we took a poll of our own company, and then we took a poll of our customers to ask them, how do they feel about things? And it was remarkable how they're so similar. And I would say that, 20% of people are really excited to get back into the office, can't wait. Another 60% are nervous about going back to the office and really want to make sure that that social distancing's in place, people are wearing masks where they need to, and that the offices are clean to CDC guidelines. That's really the key, and that's what we do, not only in our own office, but in all of our locations. And then there's probably another 20% of people who are like, you know what, I don't want to come back. I'm happy working from home, and that's my preference. I mean, I think that's really the honest truth.
And on this one, you don't have to sort of name names, but looking at you sort of the competitors in the flex office market. I mean, what kind of things did you think that some people did? Some missteps during all this. How they handled it, if you saw any.
Oh, during I think I was really impressed. I thought that that all of the operators were very proactive and very thoughtful about how they approached this crisis with health and safety, top in mind. I think I haven't heard of anyone that was really egregiously not doing that. I think once again, I think that it's a good group of folks in the industry. I think that we do care about our customers. We do care about health and safety of our customers, and that's really paramount.
Obviously, like you've been saying, a couple times that the demand is going to be there in the future, but sort of having to survive all this. Do you think there's going to be some of the shakeup, some players who might not be there next year?
Could be. This industry, like the airline industry, like the restaurant industries, hospitality, have been really particularly hard hit. So you got to have a pretty strong balance sheet to weather a storm like this. And fortunately for us, we just recently completed a fundraise at the end of last year. So we're in a good, we've got a strong balance sheet. We reacted very quickly to really manage our costs. I'll be honest, we had to furlough a number of folks. That was pretty painful. We reduced salary across the board. I took a 50% salary reduction myself, all, under the goal of that is to batten down the hatches and survive this storm. Don't know how long it's going to last, but we want to make sure we put ourselves in the best position forward. As I mentioned earlier, we're working really closely with our landlords to help manage that side of the equation. And they've been great partners and recognize the benefit of partnering with Breather long term. I think they see, they feel like there's not only we're seeing it, they're seeing it. There's an accelerating demand for flexible in the space. And so I think that Breather, along with a few other companies, are really at the vanguard of providing that solution for landlords and their tenants.
I mean, now it seems, knowing now, it seems like great timing to sort of close on a fundraising round, at the end of last year. Are you seeing now that sort of, funding is starting to dry up? People are, not looking to sort of, throw money at companies?
I think this is a challenging time to raise money in this space, I would say.
And, what other things do you think sort of are going to be challenges? Obviously, like we've talked about, the demand is there, but what are going to be some of the other challenges on sort of getting through all this?
I think that there's going to be a real strong focus. There needs to be a really strong focus on our customers as they come back into the office, right? There's going to be a lot of change. There's going to, a lot of these offices haven't been used in the last, 3 months, right? So we're, like I said, we're doing a full court press to make sure that they're ready and they're clean and, the Wi-Fi is working and all these things, right? So there's going to be this sort of, we've got nearly 500 locations. So there's a lot of work to be done there to make sure all this is ready for them. They're going to come in and they're going to have new needs that we have anticipated, some that we may not have. So we need to pay attention to that. And most importantly, just have real diligence around managing these spaces operationally. And I think the good news for us is, once again, with operating almost 500 locations in 10 markets around the world, we've gotten very, very good at managing that many remote locations. So our system's pretty robust. So we've got a pretty good handle on all of that, which will really help us as we reopen. And I think, finally, the elephant in the room is, what happens when we reopen? Will we have a second wave, et cetera, et cetera? And that's something that none of us, well, I shouldn't say don't control. I think we all do have the ability to control that. And I think, New York and many other states, I think we've done a good job of socially distancing, wearing masks, et cetera. And I think that's really critical to our success going forward.
And, managing, these spaces in all these different locations, I mean, it sounds like it must have been a struggle, like each state has sort of different levels of the outbreak, different sort of, reopening plans. Yeah. I mean, what's been some of the challenges with that?
We have a document that we call the SIP tracker, which is it's shelter in place tracker, right? It started out as a very simple document, but very quickly we realized it was massively complex because each of our 10 markets around the world is completely different, has completely different rules, regulations, et cetera. So our operations team has done an incredible job of sorting through all that and figuring out what specifically we need to do to be ready to be open for our customers.
Speaking of the reopening, I mean, what measures have been put in place for the employees who are on the site, with members? I mean, what have been put in place, to keep them safe as people start coming back?
Sure. So we pay very close attention to the CDC and WHO guidelines. And the local and state regulations. So it kind of starts with that. Okay, what are they recommending and what do we need to do? And then it goes to training. So doing training with the team to make sure that they understand how to be safe and healthy, how to clean properly. Then providing them obviously with PPE, making sure that they've got masks, face guards if they need them, gloves, and making sure that they've got the proper cleaning equipment and materials to ensure that the spaces are clean. So that's been, once again, been a pretty big effort on our part to make sure that we're all up to snuff on that.
And during all this, were your spaces pretty much completely empty, or were there still some sort of essential workers, still coming into the office?
Yeah, no, we had a number of offices that were open and were being used by essential services, and we actually even put together a program where we donated spaces to companies that were on the front lines of fighting the pandemic. It's one of the things that we could do to participate in this.
Great. I see we got a couple of Q&As. We can start looking at them. So the first one is, so what's the average square footage being taken by companies now?
About 4,500 square feet is sort of like smack dab in the middle of the strike zone there for companies that are looking for space. And we have companies that take 10,000 square feet, and we have companies that take 800 square feet. But I would say 4,500 is kind of like right down the middle.
And have you seen, you mentioned that Tammy was sort of your main client, but have you seen accountant law firms and sort of other service industries reaching out during this time?
I would say, no, I would say that accountants, law firms are lagging. There's a joke in there someplace, but I would say that, it starts with Tammy, right? They always kind of do this. And then I would say from a services firm, from a financial services are really the ones that are really beginning to become larger clients of ours. So smaller PE shops, venture capital, hedge funds. Like, if you think about a great use case is hedge funds, because it's usually kind of a small team. They don't want to be in co-working because, they can't have people walking behind them and looking on the stuff, the deals they're working on. So, and they want to, so they want a nice and kind of, breather spaces. If you've been in one, they're very modern, they're very comfortable, they're cool. So people that are looking for that vibe are very interested in breather.
And we talked a little bit about sort of, the suburban communities. Somebody was asking, do you think towns like Stamford and Greenwich and Connecticut, do you think those are going to sort of be more popular now? Are you going to be looking to opening sort of locations there if you don't have any already?
Yeah, like we're on the phone every day. I know for a fact that Fairfield County in Connecticut is pretty hot right now, and Westchester and then some of the similar types of areas around the major urban areas. So I think you'll see us. We've got a good amount of interest for those types of locations.
And this is a pretty timely one. I mean, internally, is Breather actively involved in the diversity issue? Especially in light of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think myself personally, and I know everyone on our team was shocked and disgusted with what we saw in the Floyd case. And I think it's brought a greater awareness. We do, I think, a better job than many in terms of diversity and diversity within our leadership. We also have a strong program in buying services or products from minority and women-owned firms. But what it really made us realize is that we weren't where we need to be or want to be. This is an important issue for us. And sometimes as a startup or a growth stage company, you're really focused, like you're so hyper-focused on the business that it can take your eye off maybe some of the larger social issues. And so we've made a real strong effort across our leadership team in the company to make sure that we were doing what we needed to do from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. So to point of that is we've brought on, we're in the process of bringing on some folks that can help build out to reinforce our DEI program. And we're also putting together a program, once again, kind of similar to what we did with the pandemic, but a program that makes breather spaces available to organizations that are involved with diversity, equity, and inclusion, women-owned companies, et cetera. So hopefully, if anyone on this call knows of folks that would fit that bill, reach out to us. We're definitely looking to do that. And that's kind of a continuation of a program that I led back a million years ago back in Detroit, where I was part of building out manufacturing operations for minority-owned firms and using federal empowerment zones. So to me, it's an important issue.
And you mentioned that you've been sort of starting training for cleaners and building staff. I mean, can you talk a little bit more about sort of what the specifics are with that training?
Yeah, so it starts with safety, right? So what are the things that you need to do to be safe? Then how to clean according to CDC guidelines, and I think those are probably the two most important things, that go along with that.
And has all this sort of changed sort of the economic model for specific spaces? Have you had to sort of lessen the price, or are you able to sort of keep it, about the same during all this?
We haven't reduced the, no, we haven't, I wouldn't say that we've done any broad scale reductions in price. We have, as our markets have started to open back up, we've sent out emails to our existing customers, say, hey, listen, Chicago's open, or London is open, New York is now open, we're open for business, and offering some kind of, get back to work discounts for the meeting space. But in general, no, we've kept our prices fairly firm.
And you mentioned before about sort of partnering with landlords. Was that sort of a focus before all this, and is it becoming more of a focus now, and are landlords more receptive towards it now?
Yeah, it was. I would say that once again, it's one of the things where crisis accelerates a trend. And so what we've found is now or as we kind of get into the next phase of this pandemic and the acceleration of flexible, we've seen a much more significant interest from landlords in developing flexible office and meeting space programs. And Breather is a company that is more than happy to and is really well positioned to power those initiatives for landlords.
And a broker I was talking to a bit ago was saying that there is going to be sort of interest in the suburbs and more flexible, but it's going to be sort of temporary measures. Is that a worry for Breather, that this is all this increased demand is only going to be for the short term?
Yeah, I think that's always a concern. I think that you'll see. I think that the mitigant to that is the work from home. I do think that I think that the shift to suburban and to closer to where people live is less about the pandemic or concerns about health and safety than it is, hey man, I've been working from home for the last 12 months and I don't miss the Metro North. So you know what I mean, that hour and a half commute each way. And so I think companies and executives within these companies are like, hey, you know what? Maybe now's a good time to set up an office that's closer to where I live. Because I don't need to go into the office every day, but I like working from an office and not necessarily from home. So I think that will be, so I think you'll see smaller satellite offices like that springing up in suburban markets, as opposed to I'm taking my headquarters out of the city.
And there's another user submitted question. Recognizing that flexibility is important, has Breather considered designing their spaces with access flooring for HVAC power and data?
Oh, sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. Has Breather considered designing their spaces with access flooring for HVAC power and data?
Oh, sorry. No, I wouldn't say that that's been something we thought a lot about.
Great. Well, I mean, I think that does it for all the questions I had. I don't see any more Q&A. So, I mean, do you think there's anything we missed? Anything sort of we didn't get to talk enough about?
I think the only other thing I'd probably mention, again, I know we've got a lot of brokers on the phone right now, is what I mentioned earlier, we are closing deals. I think that as your clients are looking to decide what to do next, you make sure you talk to us. We've got a lot of great, beautiful spaces coming online that are available for your clients. We protect brokers, and I think we can show you that we're a great solution for your clients. 95% customer satisfaction, NPS score in the 90s. It's tough to beat for customers that are looking for a private standalone office.
Great. Well, thanks so much again for taking the time to talk, and thanks again to Breather for sponsoring today's program. And have a great day, everybody.
My pleasure. Thanks, Nick.
Bye.